Hey everybody, and welcome to the Ready Steady Play Halloween special. For this holiday season, I've got City of Horror, which is a zombie board game that focuses a bit more on the human drama with the ever-present threat of flesh-eating zombies in the background. City of Horror is a strange mix of sort of action selection and risk management and social deduction. There are no hidden roles in the game, but what you are doing is sort of trying to guess what your opponent's plans are and mitigate the risks to you as you move different characters around a city waiting for evacuation during a zombie apocalypse. Each round, you'll be sort of voting on who's going to get eaten, and the number of votes you have depends on the placement of your characters, which gives this a very significant weight. The game works with 3 to 6 players, and I think it probably works best with a round 4, but it actually works surprisingly well with just 3, as the focus of the game shifts slightly between the bluffing element and the placement of your characters. It takes roughly 90 minutes, but I reckon that depends on your number of players and their familiarity with the game. So why don't we open the box and I'll show you what's going on inside. So inside the box here we've got a rule book. But I've made this video, so you can probably just get rid of that. Which is great because actually it's got some typos in it and some ambiguous text. And to be honest, I think you're probably going to have to get the FAQ off of their website as well if you're going to learn with the rule book. Useful for referencing though. There's a lot of sort of cards and characters with different abilities and locations with different sort of powers and stuff. And the rulebook will help you reference what those do later on and remind you. Although again, some of the text is a little ambiguous. We've also got a reference sheet with all of those things on it. We've got the locations on the front here. And on the back, we've got all of the actions from the action cards and all of the character abilities as well. We've also got this deck of 21 character cards, and the characters have a rested side like this on the blue side, and an exhausted side like this on the back side. You'll notice on the exhausted side that the points value of the character has decreased, and their action button has disappeared. But more on how that works later on. Now, we've also got a deck of invasion cards here. The game is supposed to last 4 hours, and an invasion card will happen every hour. The 0 hour is used during setup, and then one invasion card will come out every turn to determine where the zombies show up and where the supply drops take place. And the cool thing about this is that there's a whole number of invasion cards there, so that offers some randomization and replayability for your future games. We have a deck of action cards. The action cards are things like weapons and items and stuff that will be useful to you in the future, including a kitten that may lead zombies away or may not. Or a back door that allows you to enter a location that would otherwise be occupied with player characters. The adventure cards are super useful because these are the essence of the bluffing. Which cards do you have and what do they allow you to do? We've got these food tokens. Food tokens can be picked up in the center of the map and they are worth victory points. They are random. There's 0 to 3. And you may well, so picking one up may well be incredibly valuable. 3 is a huge amount of victory points. But, of course, you could wind up with a 2 or a 0, and they are pretty dangerous to pick up. So if you do go through and take the risk, well, it could... But, of course, having these food tokens once again offers an element of bluffing to the game. There are some cases where you might need them as well for other things. We've got the vaccine. This is what keeps you safe from the zombie apocalypse. Now, these vaccines can be picked up at the hospital location in the game, and that's very important because, well, they're worth 1 victory point each, which is great, but at the end of the game, you must discard 1 vaccine for each survivor you've got still alive, or else they die immediately. So if you haven't collected enough of these at the end of the game, you will, in fact, just lose or potentially stand to lose a whole ton of points. So make sure you get enough of these. Any extras that you get, you can keep, and they're worth victory points. we've also got these explosion tokens. Explosion tokens are created by volatile weapons such as homemade bombs and Molotov cocktails. And when those weapons are used, these explosions will happen at different locations on the board. And of course, if enough explosions go off at a specific location, then that location is destroyed, and that changes the state of the game. We've also got some fire markers here, which will indicate when a location has been destroyed. Well, these will indicate specifically when the A side of the armory has burned down. Does that sound like it makes sense? Well, don't worry, I'll explain what that means later on. We've also got our zombie horde. 40 zombie standees. Now, that is a very generous number of zombie standees, although I do have one minor quibble, which is that there are 40 of them. The maximum number you can have on the board at any given time is 48, so that's a little frustrating, seeing as I don't think they're supposed to be limited, although that's something that's not actually specified in the rules anywhere. We've also got this water tower, which you'll have to assemble yourself. That's the base, and this is the top. And the top has space for 2 characters to be placed there. Character standees will be placed on these spots here, and they can keep watch and unlock this power for you if they're placed there. There's also a B side in which the special power on the board changes. And that just rests here on top of the stand. But later on, if there's enough explosion tokens at the water tower, it could be destroyed. You will also find a first player marker. This is super important because being the first player breaks ties in voting. There's a zombie leader marker. This is really important. This determines who the zombies will eat if there's multiple characters at the crossroads. We've also got these cache markers, which are used to mark off parts of the crossroad if there are fewer than 6 players. Then we've got the board elements. We've got this, which is the crossroads. This is the center of the board. This is the A side, which you can tell from this A denotation here. We've also got a note up here, which shows you what action you can take on this side of the board. And this brown section here, which shows us when zombies are going to eat people who are at the crossroads. This is the truck where you'll put the food markers down on the board when you set it up. And we've also got this wheel here, which indicates all the player colors in the game and who the zombie leader is going to eat next as he rotates around the wheel. But we'll explain a bit more about that when we get the board set up on the table. Coming off of the crossroads will be 4 roads. The roads form sections of the board that allow you to put things down. This section of the board will hold the antidotes on the crashed ambulance. It also has a little turn order reminder here. We've got a military truck and a dump truck. These are used to store action cards during the game and also as a discard pile for action cards that have been used. We have here the barricades. This is actually where you'll put your zombie standees for ease of access during the course of the game. And finally, we've got the road where the water tower is placed. The water tower actually is placed here. As you can see, it says water tower. These are the markers for the explosions. When there's 3 explosions here, the water tower will collapse, killing all zombies and people in the area. It also has this brown marker down here, which indicates that zombie attacks will occur at this location if there are 4 or more zombies present. Then we've got the 4 locations available in the game. These are all on their A side, but I'll talk a bit about the A side and the B side later on. This is the church. You've got positions for 4 characters to be in the church. We've got the action that you can take at the church, which is discard a card to unexhaust a character. More on that later. We've got the name of the building here, and zombie attacks occur when there are 3 or more zombies present at the location. And we've got the A side of the hospital. We've got the action you can take at the hospital here. Discard an action card to gain an antidote. We've got the name of the hospital here, and the little A there shows that it's on its A side. We've also got this brown indicator that shows that zombies will attack at this location if there are more zombies than players present. And you've got markers for 3 players. The Armory. The Armory shows that you can discard an action card to draw an action card. If you've got cards you don't want, you want to try and get something better. We've also got the name of the building here and the A side symbol, and zombie attacks will occur when there are 3 or more zombies present. Furthermore, you can see down here we've got our explosion markers. The Armory can explode. The Armory and the Water Tower are the only two buildings that can explode over the course of the game. And if the Armory explodes, all of the players are kicked out of the Armory. They immediately go to the Crossroads, and no players can enter the Armory after that. There's also spaces for 4 players. Finally, we've got the bank. You can see here the action that you can take at the bank is to discard an action card to rotate the zombie leader around the player wheel in the center of the board. I'll talk a bit more about why that's important later on when I explain the Crossroads in a little more detail. We've got the bank here on its A side. We've got 3 zombies here which will cause a zombie attack. We've also got 3 player spaces for 3 players in the bank at any given time. So the location boards are all set up on their A side to start with, at least that's what the game recommends. But you can, of course, use the B side. All of these buildings have a B side. The B side typically makes the game a little more difficult. It also changes up what the buildings do, and typically the buildings have fewer player slots on the B side. So recommended for games with fewer players, also recommended for games with players who've played before and want to up the challenge ante. Although, to be honest, I think that having a sort of a randomized mix of A and B locations is quite good. And it doesn't break the game in any sense. Everybody's aware of what's happening at the start of the game. And so you can all kind of... it remains balanced no matter what composition of A and B sides you decide to use. It's up to you. I've also got my little player baggies that I made. Here's the blue player baggie. Now, in the player baggies, you'll find stands. These stands are in your player color and will be used for the characters that you'll be playing during the game. In a 3-player game, we'll each have 5 characters, but in a 4-player game, we'll have 4 characters, and in a 5 and 6-player game, we'll have 3 characters each. We've also got 6 cards here. These 6 cards each have the locations of the buildings in the game. So we've got a hospital, the water tower, the bank, the crossroads, the armory, and the church. And finally, we've got this little player stand, and this is just a reminder of what the turn order sequence is. Choose a location card, simultaneously reveal the location card, players move to the location, and then everything else takes place. So this is where the majority of the game will take place in Phase 4, and I'll get to turn order and what happens in just a minute. We've also got character standees. These are standees for all the characters available in the game. There are 21 of these, and they're all unique. And each player will get a certain number of these that match the characters they'll be playing over the course of the game. So now that we've had a look at all the components that come with the game, I'm going to set up for a 4-player game. So when you're setting up the game, you've got the Crossroads board here that's going to go in the middle. There are numbers around the outside, noting 1 to 4. There's also a 5 in the middle and a 6 up here. Now, the water tower will always be attached to the 6 location, making the water tower location number 6. This cannot change. Similarly, the Crossroads is always going to be location number 5. Now, the reason these numbers are important is because they'll determine which order these locations activate in later in the game. And that will be explained in more detail during turn order. But you can actually place the other 4 locations in a random numerical order. You don't have to follow any kind of pattern. In the rulebook itself, it recommends that you have the church at location 1, the armory at location 2, the hospital at 3, and the bank at location 4. But again, that's not actually, well, it's not a recommendation. That's just the picture they use in the rulebook. But you can, in fact, completely randomize the order of the locations, just as you can randomize their A and their B side. It's sort of entirely up to you how you want to set up your board in those respects, bearing in mind that the water tower always goes at spot 6. And the reason that the water tower always has to go at spot 6 is because you can actually choose the placement of these roads around the outside of the board. But if we don't put the water tower at spot 6, then it doesn't actually have a number. And a location without a number can't be activated in the activation phase because it doesn't have a number in the order turn order. So, basically you have to put the water tower there. There's no choice about it. So you'll notice as I've set up the board here that I've put all of the sidewalks pointing inwards. That's because as our zombie hordes show up at these locations, we'll be putting zombies around the outside of the building here. So putting them around the sort of the middle of the board like this is the easiest way to set this up. So here's our zombie horde waiting to burst forth into the streets of the town where our survivors are trying to survive. So we'll put our food tokens down here on the crashed food truck. It does state that when you're putting out the food tokens, that if the Crossroads board is on its B side, you will then flip 3 of them face up. But because we're playing with all of our boards on the A side during this setup video, we will keep our food, all of them, face down. But the purpose is that they're randomized, so the 3 you flip up will be random. And the purpose of flipping 3 of them face up is to give players a sort of an indication of what's available and what might not be available. For example, if you flip the 3 face up, then players know they can just go and grab that, and that's 3 victory points. Also, if you flip the 0 face up, then players know that that's no longer a risk, or there's a less risk of them taking that if they take a face down one. We put our antidote here on the crashed ambulance. Again, this is not actually... Players can't actually go to the crashed ambulance. It's simply a space on the board to hold the tokens. Then what we'll do is we'll use these cash tokens from earlier to mark off the spots on the board for the players who are not taking part in this game. So you would leave the wheel uncovered if all 6 players were playing in the game, because you'd have all of the player colors occupied. However, I'm setting up a 4-player game, and our blue player and our yellow player will not be participating. So I'll take my cash tokens here, and I'll just cover these up. And now we can remember that the zombie leader will not eat those players, but will only eat players of these colors. Next, you must determine who is going to be the first player. Now, the first player marker will pass around between players during the course of the game, because it's very important as the first player breaks ties in drawn votes. But at the start of the game, the rulebook simply states that the player who goes first will be the player who looks most like a zombie. But you can just squazy it or determine it randomly as you prefer. In this case, I'm just going to make the red player the first player because it doesn't matter in this example. As the red player is the first player, the zombie token will go down on his or her color on the zombie wheel. What this means is that if multiple player characters are caught here in the crossroads when a zombie attack occurs, then it is the red player's character who will be eaten. Once a character is eaten from the crossroads board, the zombie leader will move on to the next player color, and that person will be the next one to have their character prioritized. If there is no character of the player color that the zombie leader is situated on, he'll simply move around the wheel in this order until he finds a player whose character is present at the crossroads and will eat that character. Obviously, if there's no one there, the zombie leader just stays on the color that he's currently resting on. So the next thing that happens is our players are going to be dealt their character cards. So this is supposed to be randomized. Players get 4 cards in a 4-player game. They'll have 5 in a 3-player game and 3 in a 5 or 6-player game. The cards are supposed to be randomized. It's a little difficult because they're double-sided. So you can sort of figure out how you want to do that. I just shuffled it up and just randomly dealt them out. But you could put the character standees in a bag and just draw them out of a bag like that. It's really up to you how you want to randomize them. But I've already got our 4 players set up with their characters, so I'll just grab those now. So now I've set up our different players around the board, and I'm going to give the first player token over here to the red player, like I said I would. You can see here that each player has their standee next to their character card in their colored base. They've got their 6 location cards there as well, and all of the characters start on their blue rested side. Now, starting with the player to the right of the starting player, they're going to deal out a number of their location cards equal to the number of characters they have in play, and then they can choose which characters will start in those locations. So I'll start by doing purple. Purple has 4 characters, so we're going to reveal 4 cards off the top of the deck. We've got the hospital, we've got the crossroads, we've got the church, and we've got the bank. The crossroads is extremely unlucky. So now purple gets to decide which characters are going to which location. Now, luckily for purple, even though they've drawn the crossroads as a location, which is not a location you want to start at, and the reason for that is that so long as there's a single zombie in this location, a zombie attack will occur, which means that the crossroads is the most likely to have a zombie attack happening. Furthermore, unlike all the other locations where zombie attacks are kind of voted on, in this location, the zombie leader is the mechanic that chooses which player dies. Fortunately for purple, they're the furthest from the zombie leader token, which means that so long as there's another character in the crossroads, the purple character won't die this round. Purple has decided to place the Vigil, also known as Guard and Rex, in the Crossroads. Purple then chooses the distribution of his remaining characters around the board. This process is continued until all players have played their characters onto the board. One thing you might have noticed as I continue putting the characters out on the board is that as I place them, I'm placing them in the white squares indicated on the locations. That's because these are the character slots. Locations can become full, with the exception of the Crossroads. There's always space in the Crossroads. Now in this example, red has been especially unlucky, and this is part of the disadvantage of going last, to mitigate, I guess, the advantage of starting with the first player token. You see, because not only has red drawn a Crossroads card, which means that he needs to start one of his characters in the Crossroads, he's also drawn the Water Tower. So the unfortunate thing about this situation for the red player is, as we can see here on the Water Tower, both character positions are taken up by characters already, which means that when red goes to play a character on the Water Tower, he cannot. This character is then bounced into the Crossroads. This is how it will work for all locations throughout the course of the game. If a character ever tries to move to a location that's already full of characters, they will be bounced into the Crossroads. So now we're ready to do our action card selection. And in a 3-player game, everyone gets 7 cards. In a 4-player game, everyone gets 6 cards. In a 5-player game, everyone gets 5 cards. And in a 6-player game, everyone gets 4 cards. And the way these are done is you simply shuffle it and deal out that number of cards to each player. There is an expert variant listed in the rulebook. And in the expert variant, you do a drafting of the cards, where each player chooses one of the cards they're dealt and then passes the cards to their left. I much prefer the drafting variant of the game. I just think it gives players an opportunity to mitigate against a very terrible hand. It does allow players sort of insight into what cards are available as well in the game, even though it doesn't tell you who has what. So it sort of adds an extra layer of sort of card of memory and sort of card analysis to the bluffing game that takes place later on. But it does say that that's recommended for later games and not your early game. I also think it sort of mitigates some of this like sort of gotcha element of the action cards. If you know that the action card is out there because you saw it, then you're less likely to be sort of surprised when it comes up. However, having said that, there will be a number of cards that you won't see during the drafting round, especially with the more players that you've got. The remaining cards are put here on the military truck, and they will be dealt out later on as supplies drops come into the city. You can also discard action cards in exchange for new ones here at the Armory. And if the supply of action cards ever runs out, then you're out of luck because the supplies have run out and you cannot take actions that would allow you to draw from that deck any longer. The discard pile is never reset for action cards. And with everyone possessing their action cards, we're ready to flip over our 0 o'clock card and find out where the zombies start. We can, in fact, do our zombie setup card. And that's our 0 o'clock zombie invasion card. We'll flip over one of these cards and we'll find out where the zombies start on the board. What we can do here is we can also set up our zombie invasion deck. So as I discussed earlier, we've got 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, and 4 o'clock, which represent the 4 turns that the game will last. After 4 hours, the rescue helicopter will show up and pick up any survivors. So all we've got to do is keep our characters alive until that rescue helicopter shows up. Sounds simple? It probably won't be. So we'll shuffle these cards up. We'll put one out. And then we'll form our zombie invasion deck for this game. So there we go, 4 rounds. So now for the setup, here is our setup card. So this tells us that we're going to start with 3 zombies at the church, location number 1. So we know that the location of the church is number 1 because it's located here by the 1 on the crossroads. There's a 2 here for the Armory, a 3 here for the hospital, a 4 here for the bank, a 5 in the center of the crossroads here, indicating the crossroads itself, and a 6 up here for the water tower. This also tells me we're going to have 2 zombies starting at the Armory. This also tells me we'll have 2 zombies starting at the Armory. We're going to have 1 zombie starting at the hospital. We're going to have 2 zombies starting at the bank. We'll have 2 zombies in the crossroads. Uh-oh. Someone's going to die in the crossroads. And we'll have 2 zombies up here at the water tower as well. So now that all of our zombies are set up, everybody's got their starting characters and their action cards, all the locations have been determined, and the zombies have been put out, we're ready to start playing the game proper. So each player starts with this little placard here, and the placard shows the phase order of each hour. And it's just sort of reminding you the order in which these things take place. This number 1 space here indicates that the first thing that every player does is choose a location card to which their characters will move. And that's one of these 6 location cards here, so everyone will lock in a single location card, and they will have to move a character to that location in phase 3, which is character movement phase. You have to choose a card, you have to move a character. You cannot elect to move a character to a location they're already in, effectively not moving them. However, you can elect to choose a character who's in the crossroads to move to a location that's full in order bouncing them back to the crossroads. That's acceptable, but you cannot, for example, pick the church and then choose a character in the church to move to the church, effectively not moving them. That is not allowed. You must move a character. You cannot choose not to move a character. Then the second step is reveal the top card of the invasion deck. So here's our invasion deck here that we made earlier. So we'll reveal that. We'll find out where the zombies are going to move. This also shows where new zombies appear and where supplies are dropped. In the third step, we move our characters to the locations we locked in phase 1. And finally, in the 4th phase, we will activate all the different locations. And this is an opportunity for players to use the different building abilities at the locations. It's also an opportunity for players to activate their character abilities, play action cards, and negotiate, because this is also the phase in which zombie attacks will take place and characters will be killed. So every player will lock in one of their movement cards. Now this is an important consideration because the first player will get to move their characters first in phase 3, the character movement step, which means that you've got to be mindful of players moving around and essentially bouncing off locations that are full and winding up in the crossroads, which is not where you want to be. So the red player here is going to have to lock in the church, the armory, or the hospital if he wants to move, because the bank and the water tower are full, and if he tries to move there, he'll just be bounced back to the crossroads. So the red player locks in his card, and this can be done simultaneously. You don't need to do this card locking in turn order if you don't want to. So now that all the cards have been locked in, we reveal the locations to which the characters will move. So red player has chosen to move to the church. The purple player has chosen to move to the armory, the green player to the hospital, and the white player has also chosen to move to the hospital. But before the character movement takes place, it's time to do the invasion card. So here we are on step 2. We've just chosen and revealed location cards. Now we're doing the invasion card. So we go to the top card of our deck here, and this shows us that there are going to be a bunch of new zombies appearing and also supply drops. So we're going to get 2 new zombies at the church with 2 antidotes also being sent to the church. We're going to have 2 zombies at the armory. No one at the hospital, but supplies drop there as well, an action card and an antidote. 2 zombies here at the bank, a zombie at the crossroads, and a zombie at the water tower. So I'll just put those out now. In later hours of the game, you'll also see this coming up. Now, this symbol here means that all of the zombies, before any new zombies are placed, zombies at location 4, in this case the bank, will all move to location 1, the church. This also means that the zombie leader token will move on 1 space around its track. That won't happen until 2 o'clock. Now, if you remember earlier as well, you can only have a maximum of 8 zombies at any location. So if you are instructed to add zombies to a location that's already got 8 zombies at it, those zombies are just not added to the board. If it is zombie movement, i.e. zombies are moving from one location to another, and they're trying to go to a location that's full, then they just remain where they are. So for example, if we're moving zombies from the bank to the church, and there were 6 zombies at the church, we would add 2 to the church, and then any further zombies would not be added. They would just be left at the bank. So now that the supply drop and the zombies have been resolved, we move into the character movement step. So Red can start by moving his character. He can choose any character that he wants and go to the church. And then it's Purple. Now, this is also an opportunity for players to play action cards and use action abilities. For example, Purple's Grandma character has an ability that allows her to move at any point. Purple could exhaust the Grandma to use that ability at this time and effectively block someone. Character abilities and action cards can be played at any point except immediately after a vote has taken place. This is to stop players mitigating or nullifying the effects of the vote using character and card abilities. So Purple's going to move a character to the Armory. Green will move a character to the hospital. And now White can move a character to the hospital as well. White had hoped to put their special agent here into the hospital. However, because the hospital is full of characters, the white character will not be able to enter the hospital. Now, they could move one of their other characters, but this would mean that character would simply bounce off the hospital and enter the Crossroads. So White makes the smart play and decides to move their special agent into the hospital. Because he cannot, he remains in the Crossroads where he is already anyway. These cards are then added back to the player decks for use next time. And now we're into the activation sequence. This is where the meat of the gameplay takes place. And let's have a look at the first location on our chart, the church. So the activation step is divided up into sort of 3 sub-steps. The very first step in the activation step allows all players to use the building's activation ability. So in this case, players can discard an action card to refresh an exhausted character. This is one of only 2 ways to refresh an exhausted character in the game, with the other being using an energy drink. The energy drink can be discarded at any point to refresh an exhausted character. Note that it has the pregnant lady on it. This is simply to remind everyone that the pregnant lady cannot be unexhausted at any point. That's part of her ability, because when you exhaust her, she actually gives birth. You can't undo that. So, once everyone's had an opportunity to refresh an exhausted character, as this is the first turn, it's unlikely this would happen, but let's say Purple had used the Grandma's special ability earlier, then they could use it again now. The text for the church is actually really badly written in the rulebook. So, it reads on the text in the rules, discard an action card from your hand to flip any of your characters back to its rested side. We thought this sounded quite ambiguous, but the premise is simply discard an action card, choose any of your characters. It doesn't matter if they're at the location, and they will become rested again. Note that you do have to have a character here in order to use this ability, but the character you're using it on does not need to be in the church. Once everybody has had an opportunity to do that, and this will take place in turn order, starting with the red player and then moving clockwise around the table to green, white, and purple. Then we will engage in what's called the sort of negotiation step. Now, this is where players have an opportunity to use actions from their hand, use their character abilities to try and leverage the vote. Because after this step, we're going to have a vote. Because there's going to be a zombie attack. You see, there's 3 or more zombies are indicated for a zombie attack. So there will be a vote by the players here. And this is all of them. And the vote will be to determine who is killed during the zombie attack. Someone will be killed. The only way to mitigate this is to reduce the number of zombies to fewer than 3, in which case the zombie attack would no longer take place. The players will all have 1 vote. This is based on the number of player characters at the location. For example, if there were characters distributed like this, then purple would not get a vote because they're not there, and white would have 2 votes because he has 2 characters. However, here we've got all 4 players voting, and so they would be negotiating. It's things like I could give you an action card if you vote my way, or maybe I will not use this terrifying action card in my hand on you, or I will give you an antidote if you vote with me. It does say in the rules that the outcome, any deals made for voting at the location are binding. So what that means is, for example, if I say I will give you, if red player says to green player, I will give you an action card if you vote with me in this vote, that is binding. Green player, if he accepts the action card, will have to vote with red player. However, it says that any future deals made are not binding. So if red player says, well, green player, if you vote with me this way, then I will vote with you at another location later on. However, that's not binding. Red player could then betray green player at a later point. It also says in the rules, ignore this whole thing and just make the whole thing not binding and increase player betrayal opportunities. It's really up to you how you decide you want to do this. There will be, after the zombie attack is resolved, another vote to determine who gets to distribute these antidotes. So you could say, for example, that if you vote with me in this way and you vote with me on the antidotes, I will make sure that you get one. You know, so you can sort of team up in that way to make sure your characters survive and that you get to split the loot. It's also worth noting that in the event of a tie here, the first player, which is red, will break the tie. So players are incentivized to ally with red. So the way the vote takes place is that all the players put up their hand and then they point at someone else around the table. So in this way, if you have 2 characters at the location, you get 2 votes, but you can still only point at one other player. So you can still only vote for one other person. There's none of this. Both votes must be used in the same capacity. So if I was white player and I had 2 characters there, I would spend my 2 votes to vote for someone. But I could leverage this as part of the negotiations and say, well, I have 2 votes. If you ally with me, let's gang up and kill this other player. Like, for example, red's in first place, so let's kill them. Going back to the church here, what has happened is that all 3 of our players have decided to kill red. So a vote takes place, red has 3 votes against them, and their character is killed. Note that red had plenty of opportunity here to play action cards and use character abilities to prevent this, but I won't go into all of that detail for the purposes of this example. Now that red has lost a character, they would claim the first player token. Whenever a character is killed, the player who's just lost the character will claim that token and become the new first player, enabling them to break ties. However, because red is already first player, he just gets to keep it. Then what will happen is a vote for the sharing of the supplies. Now, whoever is the winner of this vote will get to choose who gets the supplies. There are some caveats. The first is that supplies, the person who chooses to distribute the supplies can only keep 1 for themselves. Everybody can only have 1. So you can't give 2 to one player, you can't keep 2 for yourself. You can keep 1 for yourself and you must give the other away. If there are 3 supplies, similar things happen. If there were 4 supplies all in one location, then everybody would get 1. But the person who was in charge would determine how they were distributed. Again, the first player breaks ties, even if they're not present on the voting. And finally, if you want to share an item with a player who's not present at the location, you can absolutely do that. Just because red player is no longer at the church, if green player wins the vote, green player can still give red player a supply. So what might happen is you might have a negotiation with green player saying, hey, red player, if we all vote for ourselves in the church, you can break the ties, and if you choose me, I will give you an antidote. And then white and purple player might be like, well, wait a minute, if we both team up and vote against green player, we can each have an antidote, and green player can't benefit from their alliance with red. And then red player might go, well, I really want an antidote, so if you all vote, against one another, who's going to give me an antidote? And so that will continue on and on until it's resolved, maybe with action cards changing hands or something like that. And the negotiations do not end, both in the case of the zombie attack and the sharing of the loot, until all players agree that they have nothing left they want to do. So you must show a bit of table etiquette and say, well, is anyone want to do anything else? So the negotiations must be resolved to a point where people no longer want to activate things they have or play cards that they have. Note also, though, that if someone does decide to play a card or whatever, then you have to honor that. For example, if green says to me, well, I've got this action card I'm going to play and it's going to fuck you up, If you don't give me this thing that I want, I might say, well, I've got this card and I'm playing it now because you've said that. So you can't make idle threats. Or you can, but you must be prepared to deal with the consequences of your idle threats. So here at the church, it has been decided white has allied with purple, and they've voted that white should distribute, and white agrees that both white player and purple player will each get an antidote. Now with that resolved, it's time to move on to the next location, which is the Armory. Now remember, antidote is very important because at the end of the game you can't score a character without any antidote. You must be able to discard one antidote per survivor in order to keep them alive at the end of the game and score their points. How many points are these characters worth? We already looked at the points on the food. Are there any other ways to get points? Well, actually, really, no, there aren't. There is one action card that gives out points because it's food. There is food, there are the characters, and there are the antidotes, and these are the only ways to score action points. So once we'd resolved all of these locations, we would then go back to the start of the next phase. There is a hiding mechanic where characters can hide, which means they're not eaten. If a character is hidden, it would stand up at the end of the round, and then it would be back to the top of the phase where everyone would choose a location card, and we would prepare to reveal the next invasion card after that. This will continue until the end of the fourth round when the deck is resolved. Note that if at any point during the 4 hours or the 4 rounds, someone's entire set of characters is eliminated, then that player's eliminated from the game, and unfortunately they have nothing left they can do to take part. Except maybe sit there and troll their friends while their friends negotiate. So now that, so there is these weapons that put out explosions. How do we know what an explosion looks like? Well, I'll show you. So this is a Molotov cocktail. This allows you to delete a zombie at a location. And when you use the Molotov cocktail, you put down one of these explosion tokens either on the Armory or the water tower. Just like this. When this track on the water tower fills up, the water tower immediately collapses. When the water tower collapses, all of the zombies at that location are killed, returning them to the supply. Any characters at that location are also killed. The water tower is removed from the board, and this section of the board here is flipped up. Now we see the collapsed water tower section. We note that there is in fact more character locations on the collapsed side. The parameters for zombie attack has changed to more zombies than players, and we've got the broken water tower here, water tower side. There is no longer an ability associated with the water tower. There is nothing there for players to do. When this side, the A side of the Armory, burns down, all of the players are kicked out into the Crossroads. There is a special exception for the Grandmother, a character who cannot normally move at all, except by exhausting her special ability. If she's in the Armory when it goes down, she's moved to the Crossroads for free as well. When the explosion takes place, we take these explosion markers and we just cover up the player spawn locations. This indicates that nobody can go to the Armory anymore. The B side is slightly different. When the B side of the Armory explodes, then players can no longer enter or leave the Armory, which means that any players who were in the Armory are now trapped there and cannot get out. They might be able to survive, they might not. This depends entirely on the action cards that the players who control these characters possess. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to talk about endgame scoring and exhausted characters, how that works. And then what I'll do is I'll go through the B-sides of all of these tiles so you know what those actions are. We'll look at some action cards, and then we'll wrap this video up, and we'll be back tomorrow to play the game. So it's the end of the game for red player. He's got all of his characters and stuff out here. Now, he's lost the businessman and the thief. They cannot be saved. They've died during the course of the game. However, the little girl and the little boy were still alive at the end of the game. So they're scoreable. Furthermore, the little boy is not exhausted. Now this is important. As you can see, each of the cards has 2 scores on them. And one for the rested side, which is always worth more points, and one for the exhausted side, which is worth fewer points. And you can see here that it's got the main score there, and the other score from the other side just in small next to it. And that's because you can, of course, go to the church or use the energy drink to restore a character to their unrested side and score more points for them at the end if they remain this way up. So our red player is going to have to discard 2 antidotes in order to save these 2 characters. That's 2 points that they won't get at the end of the game because these are returned to the supply. This has left our red player with 1 antidote, 1 food token here worth 1 point, and these 2 characters who are alive, so that's 5 for the little boy, 2 for the little girl, plus these 2, giving the red player a total of 9 points, which is a very respectable score. All of the players will total up their scores like this at the end of the game, and whoever has the most points is the winner. If 2 players are tied for the most points, then the player who saved the most characters is the winner. And if there's still a tie, then both players celebrate the fact that they weren't eaten by zombies, which is a pretty good achievement. So that's pretty much all you need to know to play the game, I think. If you want to stick around for a little bit longer, I'll talk about the B-sides of the locations, then we'll have a look at a few example action cards, and I'll wrap up there. But if you just want to get stuck in, that's all you need to know. So have fun surviving the apocalypse, but more importantly, have fun trying to survive your friends. So I've just cleaned up the board a little bit here, and I will now talk about what happens with the B-sides of these tiles. We'll start by looking at the Crossroads. And hopefully this will all make a little bit more sense now that I've explained how the turn order is and how the different interactions take place over the course of the game. So this is the A side of the Crossroads here, and what's noteworthy is that on the B side, you can discard an action card to pick up a face-up food or a face-down food. And that's like the only difference. So this is just to remind you that 3 of the food on the truck here are placed face-up at the beginning of the game, and that's it. So pretty straightforward. So on the church here, we've got our A side of the church, and then on the other side here, we've got our B side. Now, what's noteworthy here is that if you want to unexhaust a character on the B side of the church, that you have to discard food to do it instead of action cards, making it a lot more difficult to accomplish. The fact that characters are a lot more difficult to unexhaust on the B side of the church adds a very interesting flavor to the game. It means characters are a lot less likely to be unexhausted. Again, very interesting. It makes the energy drink a much more powerful action card, but there are ways in which to grab the action cards that have been discarded, which is also very interesting. You can use different characters. The businessman and the businesswoman can both go into the discard pile to recover a card. Furthermore, the B side of the Armory affects that as well. We'll get to that. But suffice to say, this just makes unexhausting a character much, much more difficult. Obviously, you can't do that with the pregnant woman. The B side also changes the nature of zombies' attacks. Instead of having 3 or more zombies for an attack here, now you have to have more zombies than characters. But you can also only have 3 characters at the church now instead of 4. Then we've got B side for the Armory. Now, if you guys remember the A side here, here's the B side. Now, what's notable about the B side? Again, there's fewer character spots. There's also fewer explosion markers. It's easier to explode the B side of the Armory. And here's the indicator that shows you that if the Armory does explode, that instead of kicking everyone out to the Crossroads like the A side, instead what happens is characters can no longer enter or leave this location. Anyone here is trapped, and anyone trying to get in cannot. The nature of the zombie attacks has changed again to more zombies than players. And what we've got here is this action has changed now. Instead of discarding an action card to gain a new one from the top of the deck, when you discard an action card, you gain one from the discard pile, which is a significant change. This combos quite well with the change at the church because it allows players to hunt for any energy drinks that players have already used. However, it also means that if nobody drew the energy drinks at the top of the game, they're much, much harder to come by because the only action cards that will now be gained are through the supply drops, which means there'll be a large chunk of action cards that simply won't see play in this game, making an interesting change to that dynamic. And here we've got the hospital. This is the B side of the hospital. You'll note that on the B side, the hospital actually gains a player slot, which is interesting. It also has changed the nature. Instead of discarding an action card to pick up a medicine or an antidote, now what you do is you exhaust a character to pick up an antidote. Note that you can't exhaust the pregnant lady to do this. That's because when she's exhausted, she gives birth. And when you exhaust a character in this way, you do not benefit from their character ability. So you would circumvent their power. Every other character does something when exhausted, except for the pregnant lady who gives birth. So, she gets 2 votes instead of 1 when she gives birth. But suffice to say, you cannot use her to activate this power. On the B side, the number of zombies required has also changed. Now there will be a zombie attack if there's just 2 zombies at the hospital. We've got the bank here. This is the A side of the bank. 3 zombies for an attack, plus discard an action card to rotate the zombie leader's position on the wheel. Now, on the bank side, on the B side of the bank, now this has changed. There's got to be more zombies than players for a zombie attack to take place. And furthermore, when you activate the ability here, you don't actually have to pay anything to do it, but you only move the zombie leader on 1 space. Finally, the water tower. Here's the A side. Now, the A side of the water tower allows you to look at the next card on top of the invasion deck. Very, very powerful. This will allow you to look at the next card on top of this deck, and it will give you information about where the supply drops are going to be and where zombies are going to appear. Later on, it will also tell you about where the zombies are going to move as well. So this will help you in choosing. This happens at the beginning of the round, so this will help you choose the location you want to move to in order to secure supplies or get away from zombies. On the B side, you can look at one of the movement cards chosen by one of the players. So again, you can do this at any point. There's no cost to it, and in order to do it, you'll have to do it once movement cards have been locked in. So you can look at someone else's movement card to look at where they're going to go. And what you can do as well is if you don't like what's happening, you can actually change yours as a part of this action. So you look at theirs and then change yours if they're maybe going to the same location as you or vacating another location that you want to go to. So again, a very powerful ability. So we're just going to take a quick look at some action cards to give you an example of what you might find in the game and talk about the symbols a little bit. But don't worry, we won't go through the entire deck of action cards here. There'll be some that I'll leave you to discover for yourself. So this is a rescue flare. When a rescue flare is used, an explosion is placed. When an explosion is placed, you can choose to place it either at the water tower or the armory. That's up to the player that uses the card. And this causes a zombie to move from one location to another. Here we've got a shotgun. The shotgun simply removes 2 zombies from a location. Note that an interesting thing about the cards such as the shotgun is this doesn't need to be necessarily tied to your characters. This allows you to remove 2 zombies from any location. You can use the shotgun to help out other characters at locations where you don't have a character. The night vision goggles replicate the ability of the A side of the water tower, allowing you to look at the next invasion card. The pepper spray, which is referred to in the rulebook as the tear gas grenade, is an important card because this allows you to prevent the last action card that was played. So make sure you don't miss your timing window on this. This is essentially the game's nope card. If someone does something, you can go, nope, it doesn't happen. But this is the last played action card. So if you're too slow and another player plays an action card before you can nope the one you want, then you can't prevent that from taking place. Furthermore, you can pepper spray a pepper spray, so thus cancelling out the nopes with double nope. The canned food I talked about earlier, that's worth a victory point. We've got hideout. Hide allows you to lay a character down at a location. When a character is laid down at a location, they cannot be declared the victim of a zombie attack. They can, however, still vote in the sharing of items. Running sheets can be played once everyone's revealed their location cards, and these allow you to change the location that you put down to something else. Basically saying, nope, I don't want to go there anymore. The back door can be played during the movement step to allow your character to enter a building that's otherwise full of players. As we saw earlier, that each building can hold a number of players, but this allows you to go in anyway. The replica weapon is an interesting card. This gives you 2 votes in any upcoming votes at the location. That's 2 extra votes, so if you have 1 character, you've now got 3 votes. The alarm allows you to add 3 zombies from the supply to any location. This is a great card for threatening players with. The kitten, which is actually my personal favorite, allows you to remove all zombies from one location and send them to another location. However, that location is random. In order to determine the location, you shuffle your location cards and deal 1 face up. All zombies are moved from the current location where the kitten's played to the other location. Note, again, like any other action card, you can play this to any location you want. You don't have to have a player there, and it doesn't have to be the current active location. But what's interesting is that you can, in fact, deal the location card of the location where you played the kitten, meaning that the cat has basically wandered back to where it started, and the zombies don't move at all. The flashlight allows you to move the zombie leader to any spot on the wheel, the zombie leader wheel. And so with that, we've pretty much covered everything you need to know about City of Horror, and you're ready to go and get into some horrific situations with your friends as you stab each other in the back and betray one another. I'll be back tomorrow with my friends Michael and Ollie, and we'll be getting into the spirit, the Halloween spirit, and we'll be dressing up. So please make sure that you come back and join us as we vote on who deserves to be killed. See you all tomorrow, and thanks for watching.